Hello, and welcome to another episode of At the Root. This is the place where we get to the root of connection. Connection with ourselves, with that inner you that may be in hiding, and connection with others in our relationships. Parents, family members, employers, employees, friends, teachers, mentors, even your dog or cat. We're in a state of connection every second of every day. So how does connecting work for you? What is the state of your connections? I'm a licensed psychotherapist, a certified holistic life coach, and a spiritual practitioner. I believe in the connection of mind, body, and spirit in order for each of us to be all we can be. That's what I bring to the table. All you need to bring is curiosity. I invite you to join in an exploration of connection in your life. We have recently transitioned from doing a live radio show each week, which we then presented as a podcast episode, to focusing on just the podcast. We no longer are on the radio, but you can find us on your favorite podcast platform or at my website, kipercounseling.com, or each episode is posted on our YouTube channel, Connection Through Awareness with Greg Kiper. Just look for At the Root. Last time, we finished the episode talking about laying out a healthy plan for making the changes in our relationships that head us towards rebuilding attunement, that emotional connection that helps us to sustain our passion and meaning, the purpose of our togetherness. We've talked about rekindling playfulness and supporting and being responsive to each other's needs and desires. We've worked on identifying triggers and reactive behaviors and finding the cues and responses that each of us need to continue individual growth. All of this work depends on mutual curiosity. It can't happen without engagement, authentic engagement, genuine engagement, each partner going all in. I'm calling that mutual curiosity. When we're curious about something, we have more of a tendency to be all in, especially as the subject of the curiosity unfolds in front of us. In the case of our relationships, the subject of curiosity is what? Ourself and our partner. Riding shotgun along with curiosity is discovery. When we're curious, we generally discover something. And one of the prime ways we do that is by listening. So if the subject of our curiosity is ourself and our partner, then part of the focus of our discovery is listening to ourselves and our partner. Hence, our recent focus on honing our listening skills. We've talked about bids for connection. Each day we are offered dozens of bids. Are we aware enough to accept them and interact? How many of them do we miss? What does it take for us to pay attention and live our lives in the moment? Do we have the emotional confidence needed to answer these bids and interact? When we engage, do we have the emotional vocabulary to offer empathy and understanding? Do we know what and how we are feeling? Are we able to regulate those feelings? We can't validate the other if we can't do these things. Validation of the other is a vital key to attunement. We support the value of the other when we validate. This is quite simply respect. We accept the other for who they are, even when they're different from us or we don't agree with them. This validation, this respect, builds feelings of trust, safety, and well-being, all integral ingredients of attunement. This validation of the other is what I find to be at the crux of the issue with many, if not most, of the couples I work with. I seldom hear a partner tell me that their other is not validating their feelings. What I do hear is that they are not listening. This Inattentiveness is explained in many ways. Blank stares, distracted actions, impatient and or irritable comments, lack of eye contact, fixing, criticism, pretending to be interested, or defensive words or behaviors. These are all seemingly different responses. However, I believe there is a common denominator, except in cases where there may be an attention deficit issue, which I'll address later. These are all defense mechanisms, coping skills, to unconsciously not engage at an emotional level. You'll notice I didn't say disengage. That would imply some emotional engagement had been present. In many of these scenarios, emotional engagement is not and has not been part of the relationship equation. I'm not being listened to means more than my partner is not hearing my words. It means I'm not being validated or respected. I am not being valued as a person. You can imagine how that must feel to anyone, but especially to someone who grew up in an environment of little or no respect, trust, well-being, or safety. Or perhaps one of shame and low self-worth due to unmet and unreasonable expectations. A partner's unconscious lack of validation reinforces their partner's unconscious feelings of shame and low self-esteem, or rejection and abandonment. And both live their lives in the past, triggering reactions in the other. Unconscious posturing to protect against emotional harm. Changing unconscious behavior and responses is virtually impossible because it's unconscious. The solution is to bring that behavior into consciousness where we are aware of it and we can work on changing it. Finding connection through awareness, what we talk about in this podcast. Working through this process can be trying for each partner and for the we. It requires each to understand and demonstrate the 4 P's: presence, patience, practice, and positive thinking. It also requires a recommitment to each other and to the we. I'd like to introduce you to a married couple, and we'll join them in their journey through this process. Every relationship is different, of course, but I think what they have been experiencing can provide us with examples that we can use to demonstrate learning and listening validation skills, and ultimately getting on the path to attunement. Tony and Sara have been married for 23 years. They have 3 children: Tom, who just received his undergraduate degree; Bill, who is a sophomore at university, and Caroline, a senior in high school. Sara works in human resources for a large corporation, and Tony is a mid-level manager for one of the big tech firms. Tony contacted me to set up an initial consultation, expressing that the 2 of them were growing apart and that he felt Sara had given up on the relationship and was getting ready to separate unless, in her words, things drastically change. She had agreed to doing some work, although he wasn't sure if she was just going through the motions or not. They had done some marriage counseling 6 years prior, and he said it hadn't helped much, although at the time he said he wasn't really into it. The 2 of them showed up for their initial appointment on time, and after pleasantries, seated themselves. The office consists of a couch and a chair sitting across from where I sat, adjacent to each other. He chose one end of the couch, she chose the chair, which put more distance between them. After a brief chat about parking and traffic, I settled in with, "So, tell me what is happening in your lives that bring you here?" They looked at each other, neither jumping right in to answer. Finally, Tony said, "We aren't communicating well." Sara jumped right in. "It's more than that. We just aren't together anymore. It seems like we're just going through the motions." Tony quickly said, "We just need to find more time to talk." "And I've told you I'm done talking because you don't listen when I do," she replied. Tony came back with, "Oh, come, Sara. Is this any way to start our sessions with Greg?" Sara looked at me. "You see how he is? He's more concerned with the impression we're making than with what I'm telling him." "Oh, come on, that's not fair. I heard what you said." Sara just looked down at her lap and shook her head. "There you go, shutting down again," Tony retorted, looking at me for help. I jumped in. "What was going on right before you guys got here?" I could tell I wasn't going to have any problems getting the ball rolling with these two. Sara answered, "We were arguing this morning as we were trying to get out the door." "As usual," Tony interrupted. "I don't even remember what it was about." "You didn't put your dishes in the sink again." "Oh, yeah," Tony replied sarcastically. "You know how I feel about that," Sara said. I jumped in. "I've got a hunch this tension is about much more than dishes in the sink." "That's why you make the big bucks," Tony said wryly. Ignoring the comment, I moved on. "I'd like to switch gears a bit, okay, and learn about how you two got together. How did you meet?" Sara spoke. It appeared that she welcomed the chance to talk about something else. "It was at college. I was a sophomore, if I remember correctly. 19, I think. Tony's a year older. He was into the Greek scene, a fraternity guy. I was a dorm girl, introverted, quiet, studious. He was a partier. When we met in math class," Tony added, I remember the first day I saw her. I couldn't take my eyes off her. Each day in class, I would try to sit closer so I could watch her. After a while, it became very obvious. I'd look up and he'd be looking at me. Then he'd turn away. It was kind of creepy," Sara said. "Eventually, I got up the nerve to approach her after class. I asked her if she would like to grab some coffee at the Commons." Sara jumped in. "It was a little too forward for me. I had no idea who this guy was. I told him I had another class, even though I didn't." "I didn't give up, though." "No, you were relentless." Finally, I gave in and we had dinner and went to a movie. "Sounds like he was really pursuing you," I said. "Oh, he did. Once he had my phone number, it was all over. He kept leaving messages, and I would go out with him just to give my roommate a break from his calling." "There was more to it than that," Tony interjected. "Yes, I have to admit that I was interested too. No one had ever pursued my attention like he did." "What did you see in her, Tony?" I asked. "Was it love at first sight?" "It was for me," he replied. "She was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. And the more I got to know her, the more I was enthralled. She was kind and special in a calm kind of way." "What about you, Sara?" Turning to her. "What did you see in Tony?" "Oh, he was loud and flamboyant. It was overwhelming at first, but exciting at the same time. I'd never had anyone show an interest in me that way. He showed me so much about life, and we did so many fun things together. We'd laugh and talk all night long." Tony said, "I remember that. We had a blast. Some wild and crazy times, too." "Yes, you showed me how to party," Sara said. "It got to be a bit much at times, lots of drinking." "You loved it as much as I did," replied Tony. "I thought I did at the time," she answered him, "but I think we got carried away with the partying, and it ended up being a problem later on." "Oh, we're going to talk about that now, are we?" he asked. She looked at him and didn't answer, then turned to me. I filed this interaction away for a future discussion. How long did you date before you started thinking about marriage? I asked. By the time Tony graduated, we'd been talking about it, Sara said. We wanted to wait until after I was finished with school. Tony jumped in. I got a job right away, and we moved in together. When did you get engaged? I asked. He formally asked me when we were on vacation in Mexico, Sara answered. We were pretty drunk, I remember, but it was kind of romantic. At least the setting was. Steve said, I didn't have a diamond ring at the time, but I bought a coral one, at the gift shop on the beach and gave that to her in the moonlight on the sand. Yeah, and then you passed out, Sara said. Really? I don't remember that. I'm sure you don't, Sara replied with a hint of sarcasm. Once again, I redirected. How long before you got married? Sara replied, it was about a year after I graduated. Big wedding. What my mom wanted, and I did too, I guess. And children, when did they come into the plan? We both always wanted kids, Tony replied, but the first, Tom, came along much sooner than we had planned. Sara added, I was pregnant at the wedding and didn't know it. Tom came along 9 months later. I said, so you didn't have much of a chance to get to know each other as spouses before you were parents. They looked at each other and nodded. Time was running out, so I introduced my thoughts for moving forward. After a session or two together, I like to meet with you individually. It gives me a chance to learn more about each of you. I'll be introducing some material to our sessions about what I call our attachment systems. Each of us are born with a need for connection with others. And over time, this attachment system develops and gets molded by all kinds of input in our lives. So I want to explore that with each of you. I'll meet with one of you next week and the other the following week, and then we'll get together again, all of us. I don't care who goes first, so you two decide. And you don't have to right now, so I'll see one of you next week. The session ended. The two of them had given me a feel for how they interact and some insight into potential issues. So we'll pick it up with the two of them next time as we explore more about their attachment systems and how that plays into their engagement with each other. And we'll explore their ability to listen and validate. Before we sign off, I want to remind you all that connection is about awareness. And I'd like for you to do your best to keep that reminder in your awareness as you move through your daily routines. When we are aware of our thoughts and feelings, when we are aware of the experiences that are going on in our mind, we are able to connect on a conscious level, avoiding the unconscious patterning of our past. When we have that kind of awareness, we are in the present moment, acting from the now. So that's all for now. Tune in next time as we learn more about Sara and Tony and attachment systems. And remember, everyone, be aware out there. See you next time.